Tahoe Public Utility District Board of Directors. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Do we have any comments from the audience? Hello.
Thank you. Mr. Garner from the Montgomery Estates Coal Creek Trail neighborhood, John's neighborhood. Again, I thank you for the cooperation that you've extended to us in your 3 parcels, the water tower, the little fenced-in area on the Coal Creek, and your pumping station or filtration building. We are 3 years now approved or recognized as Firewise in that neighborhood because of defensible space work done of the neighbors and the cooperation of you folks. Specifically asked August, if we might get a little more work on the water tower lot, as it was adjacent to, I think, 4 lots on Coal Creek Court, one of which is the lot of Mr. Dan Dvorak. Anybody know Dan Dvorak?
I do.
Okay, well, Dan has contracted an illness and is away from his home at the moment. And his son, Mark, who is a Navy veteran, and one of 2 South Lake Tahoe High School graduates to be selected for the Naval Academy. I can't say the year.
1980.
1980, is it, Chris?
Yeah, we went to school together.
Thank you. I'm pushing the idea that for next month's Veterans Day, to acknowledge those in the community who we don't often think of. Thank you for the work that you do in the neighborhood that supports us, and you'll get tired of hearing me say it eventually. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Never get tired of positive.
Oh, I did have one thing more. South Lake Tahoe Fire and Lake Valley will be having open house activities this weekend because Sunday is National Fire Prevention Day. Not protection, National Fire Prevention Day. October the 9th, read the Tahoe Trip. I got interviewed.
Thanks for all your efforts to coordinate all the work in our neighborhood.
Okay, corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. So are we, D is no longer, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so
7D?
7D is going to be forward.
Yeah, we're still working with the union on that.
That's right.
So we'll pull 7D today.
So then, you now become, is that correct? Okay.
Move that we approve the consent calendar. Second.
Was that supplemental?
Yeah.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. And we have a presentation. Is your staff going to come up while we try to read this?
Debbie, Heidi, Greg, and I almost said Susan. She retired a few months ago. Come on.
Here we go. All right.
But she doesn't care.
The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada has awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to the South Tahoe Public Utility District for its annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. The report has been judged by an impartial panel to meet the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the report. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management.
I've got to specifically recognize Debbie because this will be the last year that she'll be here to get this award for the department.
Thank you all.
And she's done such a wonderful job over the years that's allowed us to get this award year after year after year. Greg has been trying to fill in this year her shoes because she basically turned over the reins to him, and he did a great job working on the audit this year, and so we expect the same result next year.
All right.
Easy. No pressure.
Okay, that brings us to 7A, Evo.
Good afternoon, board members. So item 7A is for the Flat Creek temporary sewer crossing. It's actually for the Flat Creek Sewer Pipeline Protection Project. I just wanted to give you an update as far as the progress of that work for this emergency action. The last time, I believe Julie gave you an update on September 15th at the last board meeting. About that time was the time that we issued a notice of suspension of work as we were trying to still work through the final permitting with the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board and Army Corps of Engineers. Well, I'm happy to report that we have worked through that. We received the final permit from the regional board on September 27th, and we received the final permit from the Army Corps of Engineers actually yesterday afternoon. And yesterday afternoon, we also issued the notice to resume work between constructors. So we're ready to get back on the ground and get this project over with, hopefully without any calamities. And that's about it. So any questions?
So just, yeah, kudos, and I guess just quickly, great job getting the Army Corps permit. I was just curious, how did the date in which you obtained the permit kind of align with your understanding when you submitted it? Meaning, did the Army Corps kind of hold true to when, you know, their process, their end of the deal?
So we started on this in April, and the goal was to have the permits in hand by the time of the pre-grade on September 12th. And so that didn't happen. Lahontan, was getting the notices that, we have it going through admin, final review, and basically that's what added, it wasn't just that, but on both sides, Lahontan and Army Corps, it was just getting it pushed out of the organization that took, again, it was now 23 days. And so that was a delay, and all kinds of things happened over those 23 days to delay it, and but that's what it took, and I'm glad that we had it in hand, and I think we still had an opportunity to get the work done.
Are you going to get a grading season exception with your review?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think you'll need that till?
Excuse me?
When do you think you'll need that till?
Right now, I mean, if we started the project today, which we're not, we would be in water with the project till November 1st. Okay, so I haven't had a chance. I've been trying to get in touch with Hayne constructors and get the schedule, the updated schedule kind of finalized. And so it's going to be early part of November. That'll probably roll into, but everybody, again, especially on the TRPA end, understands the need for the project, and I don't believe we're going to get too much of a pushback on it.
Good job, Edo.
Thank you very much.
I understand through the grapevine that you were extremely persistent in getting the permits pushed through, so thank you.
And it was the closest thing to giving birth that I've... Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have a motion? Do we need to continue the emergency action? How about I'll do it? I move that we continue emergency action to complete temporary measures and construction of the Tallac Creek Sewer Pipeline Project to prevent the collapse of the district's Baldwin Beach Sewer Pipeline into Tallac Creek.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
Are you ready for me?
Ready?
All right, I'm gonna make myself comfortable up here for a little while. The first item on the list here, 7D, Diamond Valley Ranch Facilities Emergency Repairs Project. So I'm here to once again ask that we continue the emergency action out in Diamond Valley on the heels of the rain events that occurred back in August. Trevor's been on vacation. He would normally be helping me give this update. Let me restate that. He's not on vacation. He's taking some family leave. And so I'm kind of winging it today on the update. I have seen some very impressive photos come through from Diamond Valley Ranch in the last couple of weeks with the progress that they are making with our own crews and some rented equipment in clearing the ditches. Yeah, they really are impressive photos where you can see the cross-section of dirt from a flat ground surface at the top, cutting all the way down through these concrete lined ditches and clearing them out. So progress is being made, and Trevor will be back next week to kind of pick up in his management of that where he left off. John, do you have any other updates from Diamond Valley that I may not be aware of other than that work?
I don't.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me that I can maybe punt? If I don't know.
I think I'm good.
Okay. All right, so with that, I am asking that the board continue the emergency action to repair the Diamond Valley Ranch facilities per resolution 3230-22.
So moved.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
All right, moving on to item 7C, 2023 Black Bart Waterline Replacement Project. We had the bid opening a few weeks ago. That was on the heels of a mandatory pre-bid that occurred on August 9th, of which we had 8 general contractors. Only 3 of those ended up bidding. But we believe that we got fair pricing. That was actually quite an impressive spread on the bid results that we received. Bid Construction was the apparent low bidder, coming in at approximately $900,000 below the second low bidder, and well under the engineer's estimate. Trevor has worked with Wayne Vincent to review the bid, and everyone is confident that their pricing is sound, and they are excited to move forward with us on this project. So we have conducted our review of the bid forms. The bid from Vincent Construction was very clean. We did not find any substantial problems with either the bid forms themselves or with the disadvantaged business enterprise outreach, which they are obligated to do because this project is being funded by the state revolving fund. So just a little bit about the project before I ask you to award the project. This is roughly 7,400 linear feet of water main in the Black Bart neighborhood, plus another 250 to 300 feet over on Ham Lane in the center of town. That Ham Lane work was intended to be done by Vincent this summer under the Bowers project, but because we were struggling with getting some easements in place and the timing of the work, we basically ended up carving that out and rebidding it this year. So this 74 to 7,700 linear feet under this project, this is a larger project than we have been in a while, and it is the way things are heading with our waterline projects. We are trying to bid larger projects so that we can get more done faster and hopefully bring in some new construction firms that we haven't seen before. Bigger projects tend to be a bit more appealing to firms coming in from off the hill. And we did see that with this bid. The second low bidder was a firm called Flowline from the Sacramento area that has never bid our projects before. So I saw that as a positive result, and we'll continue heading in that direction for efficiency, so we'll hopefully continue to save the district money. With that, do you have any questions before I read the requested action?
Anybody?
Just, can you speak to any fire benefits,
Yes. So this neighborhood, so Black Bart neighborhood is the one directly behind us that is both sides of Black Bart from Meadowcrest over to Pioneer Trail. And the vast majority of water mains in that neighborhood are 2-inch. Also, on Black Bart Avenue itself, we have a 10-inch main, but we also have a 2-inch main. And you may have noticed driving back and forth on Black Bart Avenue that more and more patches are appearing along that stretch of road. Those leaks are all popping up on this 2-inch main. So as part of this project, we will be abandoning that main and transferring any remaining services that are on that line to the 10-inch main, which has so far not been particularly problematic for our crews as far as leak repairs go. So all around fire benefits, we'll be adding fire hydrants in that neighborhood where there currently are. And get some decent sized water mains to serve those hydrants.
Yeah, really positive, thank you.
Great. Anything else? All right. Well, with that, I request that the board award the 2023 Black Bart Waterline Replacement Project to Vincent Construction in the amount of $3,425,176.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
There's a sea of faces that I'm not used to back there. I'm getting impressed. Just in case they have some questions that I can't answer. So we're here today to request that we issue a purchase order to FlowServe to help us with the fabrication of a new pump base, steel pump base for both pumps 1 and 2 out at Luther Pass Pump Station. We've been working for the last several months with White Rock Construction to reinstall pump number 1 at Luther Pass. We were intending to reuse the existing base in that reinstallation, but when it was removed from the pedestal for rehab, it became apparent that it is extremely bowed. The pump bases are original to the 1960s construction of that station, and yet we have pumps number 1 and 2 are both brand new. And so rather than trying to straighten the frame and commit ourselves to continued reliance on a 1967 base, we contacted FlowServe about getting us a quote for fabricating a new one for us. I want to talk a little bit just about the kind of history of vibration. That's really the problem we're trying to solve here.
Yeah. Pump number 1, we've had nothing but problems with it. I'd say like maybe the last 5-6 years with the vibration in it. We've tried on many things, such as we've had the bearings out several times, had the housings out, had them re-machined. Can never quite figure out why we keep coming up with a vibration issue with the pump. Have had it realigned, kind of like line board with so the pump shafts and the bearings were all within line, so we can try to minimize some of the vibration. Still yet to get that figured out. We tried installing the new pump in its position. We were unable to even get rid of the vibration with the new pump. So we started thinking it was possibly a structural issue. So that's when we had engineering involved.
Yeah. So our game plan is to get one pump base, the one for pump number 1, which is currently out of service and sitting on the floor. Get that one going immediately. They gave us a 5-week lead time upon approval of the purchase order to get that pump base to us. So hopefully we'll be able to get pump number 1 reinstalled right around Thanksgiving. And then also order a pump base for pump number 2, that because it's not being accompanied by the actual installation services, they put a lead time of about
20.
almost 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one we'll use in the spring for pump number 2. We figure on this first go-round, we will just rely on FlowServe to do all the installation, all their own testing, and help us get this pump up and running. And then if it all looks pretty straightforward, then for the second one, we'll either go back to White Rock or with our own crews, work on getting that pump number 2 reinstalled next spring.
So the 200,000 is for both the manufacturing of the base as well as installation?
That's correct.
And then there's some additional potential future costs associated with this?
For the second base.
So once FlowServe does their work, pump number 1 should be done. And then for pump number 2, the 75,000 just gets us started with a new base, and then there will be additional expenses on top of that for the reinstallation of pump number 2.
And then I guess the new bases, are they being re-engineered to better accommodate? Or are they just kind of going with the existing specs, or how are they?
It's interesting. We're trying to look for whatever would be the most expeditious and least expensive option for doing this. And so I actually asked them if they would give us their spec for their bases, and we would have it fabricated locally and installed, and they said no. So they said it was proprietary. So we'll see what we get when it shows up. They have given us cut sheets for them, but good. The base and the pump kind of go together. So.
I appreciate the ask, though.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. All right, any other questions?
Nope.
All right, with that, it's a long one. I'm asking that you authorize FlowServe to be the sole source, I didn't even talk about this part of it, I'm going to hold on for a second. take one step back, and because we have three FlowServe and one Byron Jackson pump. Byron Jackson was bought by FlowServe at Luther Pass. We are kind of married to this brand for the foreseeable future. So the recent pump purchases that we've made, we've done all of that without sole sourcing them, but it became clear through this process that we need to work with them closely to keep these pumps in working order. So we're asking you to sole source first so that any future purchases that we make, we're not being obligated to bid them around, look for different manufacturers. This is our brand for that station. So with that, any questions? We're asking that you authorize FlowServe to be the sole source brand and sole provider for pump systems, including appurtenances and select services at Luther Pass Pump Station. Authorize staff to execute a purchase order with FlowServe to provide and install a pump base for pump number 1 at Luther Pass Pump Station in an amount not to exceed $200,000. Authorize staff to execute a purchase order with FlowServe to provide a pump base only for pump number 2 at Luther Pass Pump Station in an amount not to exceed $75,000.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. You don't want to stay up here and take this one?
No, you're long-winded.
Not the first time I've heard that. Okay. All right. Okay, ready for me?
Yes.
All right, so agenda item 7F is a request from the engineering department to add additional staff to help us move forward the capital improvement program. I want to take just a minute to take a step back to 6 months ago, spring of this year. I presented to you the needs of the system, and with that we presented a capital program, a 10-year capital program of $218 million. That was nearly $70 million more than the 10-year plan of the year before. That 10-year plan was developed based on the needs of the system. Every year, the engineering department meets extensively with all of our operations departments to talk to them about, what is the state of the system, what are their needs, what things have failed in the last year, what do they see is upcoming. And we bring all of that information together from all those different departments and create the 10-year plan. The vast majority of the increase in needs this most recent year was in water line replacement. We have been falling behind in recent years in our water line replacement. Back in the 1990s, early 2000s, we were replacing 10 to 15,000 linear feet per year. But since that time, it has really fallen off, and we've only replaced about a mile a year, about 5,000 linear feet a year. The plan that we developed for you in the spring ups that quantity to 16,000 linear feet a year. And the information that we are getting out of our artificial intelligence tool that we have developed to assess the health of our water system suggests that we should be replacing more on the order of 22,000 linear feet a year. So that's kind of where that big increase in requested spending came from. And at that time, the board concurred with our assessment that we needed to start planning for this. So we have been working towards the implementation of that 10-year plan over the last 6 months. I've met several times with my management team in the engineering department about what is the most sustainable and effective, cost-effective way for us to implement this plan. And we feel that adding staff to to complete those additional projects is going to result in the best product for the district. Not only do our staff know our system best and can implement those projects most efficiently, they can also take on roles for the district in the implementation of those projects that outside consultants can't. Such as helping to support our own water shutdowns during water line replacements, coordinating directly with our staff, and coordinating directly with our customers. So we looked at a couple different ways to move forward. The proposal that I put together actually included 5 new staff members for the engineering department. The alternative approach that we looked into was, what if we only added 2 new staff, a project manager, a senior associate engineer, and a contracts clerk. If we had just those 2 people, we could then rely on consultant services for all the remaining pieces of the puzzle, which is pretty much the design, the construction management, and the construction inspection services. We could get it done either way, but relying on consultants in that way would be far more costly for the district in the implementation of those projects. And we don't then also reap the extra benefit of having, this in-house knowledge that you get from your staff. So that's kind of the background behind the reason for our ask. What I brought to the board today is actually not a request for 5 additional positions, but for 4. The position that is missing from this list is the contracts clerk. We've had a half-time temporary contracts clerk helping us from August of last year to April. That half-time position has been vacant since then. Before we want to proceed with requesting a full-time position to take that place, we are working with other departments, finance and administration, looking at if there are ways that the administrative assistants in those departments can help offset some of these needs and get us where we need to be without adding a full-time position to the district. So we are committed to pursuing that through the remainder of this year and see whether we're able to reduce some of the backlog of contracts work that has developed in the department. So that leaves 4 positions that I have brought to the board today: a senior associate engineer, staff engineer, a CAD analyst, and an engineering inspector. It's kind of the full suite, full range of services that the district relies on to move forward its capital projects from top to bottom. So that will give us that'll give us the resources in-house that we think that we need to move forward this plan without relying even more heavily on consultants as we already do. So, questions at that sort of pause for breath?
Yeah. So Kelly and I participated in the meeting with Julie. Cliff was also there, Liz, Paul, and it was a great meeting with John leading the meeting. What we decided is that the engineering department is better served by having in-house work done rather than consultants. That was our, the top of our pyramid. But with that said, there's also some concern that we can pay for it. So we basically just kind of discuss all the options we could think of to accomplish what needs to be done. And the requirements for the district's CIP program have increased exponentially almost. So we need to keep that ball rolling. However, there was some concern whether or not we could afford that and continue to pay for it, especially in light of unknown variables of the economy that we can see so far. So, Cliff, had a great presentation. We listened to what he had to say about the needs of the crews on, that do the repairs. We listened. So we got to see the whole picture, and what we decided that we could do to keep the ball rolling was to give Julie at least 2 of the positions she needs, the CAD operator and then the other position.
The project manager.
The project manager. That leaves us in a position where we can continue to process these projects. It's also somewhat dependent upon what the board decides to do for rates next spring. And I think comfortably I can say that I think we don't really have a choice but to find something that allows us to pay for it. In addition, the needs of the crews that John has been discussing with us, we're going to find a way to make sure everybody's got what they need to keep the work moving and everybody. So it was a very transparent meeting, and that's what I'm trying to say, that we're kind of moving towards open discussions on what the needs of everyone is. But Julie's are the most time limited, so that's what we both agreed that we're going to support that motion to try and get her a couple more people so that we can get the work done.
So you're supporting 2, or
We're supporting 2 for now. Yeah, and then that lets her keep moving forward. And then the other positions that she's asking for, I think we can accommodate or add sometime in the future, depending on what you guys see as for the rates next year and Paul's ability to say we can pay for it.
I guess, so you said if you had two individuals, it was going to be a project manager and
And a CAD operator.
and a CAD, okay. So, and then the rest are going to farm out.
So the reason for that is because we do have access to outside resources for engineering inspection, and both the staff engineer and the engineering inspector have summertime inspection duties. And so, those are the easiest for us to fill the gaps from the outside.
Where are those sources located? Where's our
So, like, most often we've been using construction materials engineers, CME, out of Reno, to fulfill those services. I have received a proposal from Nichols, who is based here locally, to provide inspection services for us on the BG1 water line. And so, that I think there are other options in addition to CME. It has been our intent, but for lack of resources, we haven't gotten into it yet, to develop an on-call inspection services list of consultants that we can tap when the workload demands.
And I guess that, kind of the point Chris raised, my thought, as I was listening to the presentation, was the need of this meets the need of everything else, and where does that pie get divided up? And what slice of the pie would, for full-time employees like this, take the pie? You know what I'm saying? So kind of more holistically, like, if you did hire all 4 now, just kind of theoretically, from a fiscal perspective, what is our ability to hire, employees in other spaces of need?
So, one thing I didn't mention, even though I was a little long-winded, was that, the total value of, the 5 positions I'm asking for is, today is $800,000 a year. It gets up above 9 by the end of 10 years. And yet the capital improvement plan has been built with, markups in it to cover the cost of consultants and or staff. So my proposal has been that we will reduce the amount of the markup to cover the cost of those staff members, and then shift that that number to the O&M side so that it doesn't have an overall impact on the annual budget. That's my proposal. So hopefully it's not taking away from any positions that may be needed in other departments.
Paul, did you want to give any comment?
Sure, I'll make the same comment I made when we met with the committee members, that I I don't share Julie's optimism that there's actually extra money in the CIP to pay for these positions, with the continuing inflation that we're seeing month after month, and I know it's expected to continue on well into calendar year 23, which is why I was kind of recommending either delaying this or phasing it in, which is kind of, I think, what we ended up talking about. So we can see really where we're headed, and we can see, once we kind of come to an end of this high inflation, we can see what that long-term impact is going to be on it, and if there is any additional funds. Because we've never budgeted that way before, that I'm aware of, that we had additional dollars in there for wages.
Since I've been involved in the capital improvement plan, we have had markups that are intended to account for staff and or consultants. So on our pipeline projects, we always build a 10% markup on top of the anticipated construction cost. And that anticipated construction cost already has a safety factor on it that accounts for, like, we don't want to be the low bidder, right? So we've got sort of an inflated construction cost on top of which we apply another 10%.
We'll just kind of have to see. I mean, we know that there's other areas of our budget that are getting hammered by inflation right now. The example I gave earlier was the chemical costs here in the treatment plant. They were double what they were a year before. And those are unbudgeted dollars. So there's definitely plenty of inflation-caused increases that we're seeing that could eat up those dollars.
Yeah, so, like I said, the bulk of the increase in the capital improvement program is these pipeline projects. And the water line projects they're our bread and butter, right? We've done more of them than anything else. We have the most confidence in our ability to predict what those are going to cost, and the bid history over the last several years supports that. So, Paul calls it optimism on my part, but I'm really basing it on our historical experience with our actual bids and what it's cost us to do those projects. So, I believe the money's there.
So just like, I know we've been talking about you kind of factored into the capital improvement program, but I'm just curious, so let's say we hired the 4, how much does that save us? If we were to if those people were going to be consultants, how much would we save on an annual basis roughly?
Right, so we ran some numbers, and for a 1 mile project, farming it out will cost us roughly double what it costs us to complete that same project with in-house staff. And for these larger 2 mile projects, it's still about 50% more expensive to use consultants than in-house staff. So I think the trade-off we have to recognize here is that if we only hire 2 staff right now, and then we have to hire consultants for, doing more field inspection, then, that's going to be more expensive than if we hired all 4 staff right now, because consultants are just more expensive.
And you're trading that off with the long-term commitment of permanent staff.
Right.
So that was much of the discussion in committee. And just to remind, as a restatement, our CIP is currently $219 million over 10 years. To fund that, we're projecting 8 and 9% sewer and water, 8 and 9% increases over the entire 10-year period. So there's some concerns about whether future boards would be able to retain that. Also, that 219 million over 10 years, that's a 35% increase in terms of projects. And so I think this request from engineering would represent, with 4 people, 4 or 5, more like a 25%.
It was 33% if you included all 5. If you only count the 4, it's more like a 25%.
Okay. So we're seeing economies of scale. And our staff can much more cost-effectively produce these linear projects. So that's behind some of this thinking as well. So I think the committee recommended that we kind of phase this in. There's some, as always, economic uncertainty. It seemed like a big lift today to say that future boards are going to retain 8 and 9% rate increases. Even though back in May, the board agreed that that's what it would take to finance that 10-year plan. So just some other thoughts.
Any comments from the audience?
I guess one thing I just say is, I think it's, versus 20 Paul's comments, and the uncertainty, that we should set like a date certain, and you know what I mean by certain, to revisit this. In that if we are paying double, and then, you start to extrapolate that over X number of linear feet, it gets to be a big number, right? And so, and I don't know what to say the economic indicator would be if, inflation falls below X percentage or whatever that would be, but look to create a situation in which we can revisit this quickly. Because I think there's some, certainly some wisdom in the phasing things in, and there is uncertainty in this moment, which is a moment, so we make sure that this doesn't kind of fall into oblivion as to kind of continues. And I would look to do it, and sooner rather than later, is meaning all the benefits exist, so once we have a sense of our economic future and some, word sense of what the rates are going to be in at least the next couple of years, look to revisit this, to bring this back to get the in-house knowledge and save money if possible.
I would like to be able to come back as soon as next June, see how, how we progress through the winter, how successful we were with the recruitments that we will move forward. And, let us get through one more budget cycle, right, and see where we're at, see if the sentiment changes with new board members. But if that's too soon, then it would be probably in alignment with the next Prop 218, which is the following year.
Yeah, I would look to do it in June. Again, I think, because, worst case scenario is there's still too much uncertainty, whatever the reason would be, but it was just touched on it again. But other than that, I would say, remind myself of Kelly and Chris.
Yeah, that sounds good. I guess for me, it would be nice to have kind of a big picture perspective on kind of what our needs are for in terms of staffing, I guess bigger picture kind of view, because it seems like we're kind of piecemealing this. The way I see it is you guys are overworked as it stands today, and that you guys do need support. You guys are being asked to do all kinds of different things here and there that aren't engineering really in a lot of ways. So I guess for me, that's kind of what I'd like to see, is more of a large perspective on kind of what the overall needs are and where we can maybe move people around or better accommodate the overall mission of the district.
Well, we worked on that. There was a lot of discussion on that. That wasn't, we touched that a lot, as a matter of fact. And, realistically, we're somewhat limited in the time during the construction season. So Julie, basically what's going to happen is the projects have to get bigger in order to accommodate the CIP, right? So you're going to get some economies of scale. You'll probably get more competitive pricing because of the sizes. I think we agreed on that. You told us that. I agree with that. And it allows her to keep moving, and that's important. I think that's important. And then in the meantime, we work on the other pieces of the pie that we're looking at with John.
We do need to certainly consider the impacts on our other crews with a growing CIP. So once we get some direction today, we're planning to go back and talk to, Chris and Jeff and the crews, and talk about your projected needs and the impacts to your crews based on this growing CIP over time.
An aging system, it's impacting us because we need to start replacements, but it's impacting the crews even more, because it's harder to maintain a system that's old than one that's new, and so.
Yeah, we're losing ground in a lot of areas. Water leaks, now our crews spend almost all of their time repairing water leaks, so we're getting water quality issues on corroding water pipes, so we've got to trim the time.
Yeah, I believe you'll be able to get the 4 or 5 people you need. I think, but as a good middle ground for now, we go with 2 and get you moving, and then when you need to come back and we figure out how we're going to pay for it, then we do it again. I have no problem with that. I would come back. I probably won't be here when that happens, but I support that. I support that.
In general, I'd rather see our ratepayer dollars go to our staff as opposed to consultants. Just in general, I'll say that. So.
Well, that's why I would like to, to put it simply, we're paying more in the short term ahead of the long-term bet, right? And so the long-term bet being the uncertainty that Paul stated. And so I'm fine hedging my bet in the very short term. In kind of a situation like this, that would be June to me, but I'm in alignment with Shane, just the rational economically, what, in addition to inherent benefits it would be to have in-house staff members. So that's why I'm saying bring it back sooner rather than later.
So would you like me to amend my request? All right, I'm asking the board to authorize staff to add 2 new positions to the engineering department, a senior associate engineer and a CAD analyst 1 and 2.
So moved.
Okay, I think Shan was first on that.
She was kind of moved.
Who was second? Tahoe?
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Unless you guys want to rush and vote.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Motion passes.
Okay, that brings us to standing and ad hoc committee and liaison reports.
Oh, right. Item A, paperless board agendas. So this was a small task that we discussed at the Systems Efficiency and Sustainability Committee, but I'd like to tackle this from a different angle than sustainability today. Since before I got on the board, I'm sure Shane would say the same thing, Melanie has been such a lovely and wonderful person, and thoughtful, considerate, and helpful in everything she's done. So the idea of Melanie spending so much time putting these things together when they exist on my computer, and I don't look at the paper ones anyway, just didn't seem right. And plus then we're using the paper. So this, moving to paperless board agendas was really looked at, honestly, we talked about in the Sustainability Committee, using paper kind of for that reason. But the real reason is, if Melanie's spending, multiple hours, a couple times a week, put these together, doesn't need to happen, there's so many things to be done. So there was a lot of reasons we thought this was a good idea.
Yeah, I would agree. I guess the only thing I requested is a notepad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to write stuff down?
So I can write stuff down. I intend to do that.
I was privileged.
So there was that, I guess going to the item B, ad hoc Tahoe keys negotiation. So I thought that was actually, really kudos to Adrian's staff. I thought that presentation was put together like incredibly well, really complex, kind of discussion and a lot of variables and things to be looked at. It was put together in a very concise and like easily understood kind of presentation. I think really what we touched on was where we are in the process. Are we calling it phase 2?
Phase 3 is the next phase.
So we finished phase 2, and so really what it was looking at the deficiencies of our system, and what it would take to kind of, from a cost and engineering perspective, to lift all those things up, to get it to a place where we would want it before we could really entertain kind of interacting with the keys. And so it was helpful both in that exercise, but then also, pointed out certain areas of kind of liability into consideration that I hadn't thought of before, and then especially ones that weren't really considered on the 10-year plan. So I thought it was helpful in a lot of different ways. And so the next phase is going to be looking at kind of what the key side would have to do, cost of everything, like what would be the future financial liability to the district, based on what would need to happen to the keys. So, we had talked about some figures about what that would take going forward. And at the end of that meeting, there was a request that it be kind of a 75-25 split, meaning the keys pay for 75 of it, we pay for 25% of a maximum to say $100,000. So our financial responsibility would be $25,000. I'll be honest, I think Adrian, Shane, and everyone was fairly skeptical with that idea at first. Although the reason I kind of warmed to it later, just to be honest, and I didn't kind of change my own position, was really your presentation in that if we did interact, if this relationship with the keys does go forward in some way, there is a lot of kind of opportunity to raise up our existing facilities and infrastructure, finance kind of through the development of that relationship to $3 million, somewhere in that ballpark. And so it's, as you're hedging, kind of my previous comment about hedging your bets, it was, for 25 grants to help, kind of push us along with a conceivable, paycheck at the end that allows us to upgrade our own system while creating, 1,500 kind of permanent customers. I tend to think maybe the 25 split seems fair, but, kind of throwing it to you and, any additions you want to add?
Sure, I'll just say, so the meeting was attended by Jovi Stefalou and, was it Mark Madison and, what's the guy's name? Ken Silvera.
Yes.
And then, so Adrian did a great job of kind of presenting the results of phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of the assessment of our existing system and what's going to take for us to kind of build our system in order to accommodate options for the Keys in terms of supplying the water they need. And then, also talked a little bit about what the scope of phase 3, which is really just kind of a condition assessment of the Keys system right now. What is it going to take to bring that up to speed? That's still outstanding. And then Nick has basically identified that they had asked for some kind of cost share as it relates to that phase 3 component of it. I misinterpreted it as being, some other, that's really kicking down a lot of the costs associated with putting that system up to speed. Mostly after that. And then Gary did a really good job of kind of characterizing their experience in working through the acquisition of other water districts and some of the things to, consider along the way, including things like a benefits assessment district or like a special use district of some sort.
Yes.
And so we just kind of talked through some of that stuff and some of the procedural and timeline considerations as we move forward and working towards, the potential of acquiring the Keys water system. Still, I think at least I walked away thinking that I would not really want to entertain that until we have a full sense and understanding of what the condition of the Tahoe Key system is and what it would cost and how much the Keys is going to help contribute towards that transition. But I don't know if you want to say anything else on that.
Yeah, part of the discussion dealt with if these improvements in phase 3 are going to be mapped out and roughly costed out, how is that going to be paid for? And I think the discussions have been that the improvements need to be paid by the Keys customers, not put on the backs of your existing customers. The approach that I thought most beneficial would be a benefit assessment district or similar. There's other ones similar to that as well. But basically, the Keys customers would be charged the same rates as the district's customers. Then on top of that, they would form, the district would form a benefit assessment district and assess those additional costs to do the improvements only on the Keys area, on the customers in that area. Mark brought it up, and I had this also in the discussion is, well, couldn't we just do maybe a separate, what we call an enterprise? Right now, the district has water enterprise and a sewer enterprise. You could do a separate enterprise. Typically, they would be called zones. And your existing zone would be zone 1, and that Keys would be zone 2. And you run a separate Prop 218 rate process on the Tahoe Keys. The primary problem I see with that is numbers-wise, it's a relatively small group of people of 1,500 customers plus or minus that could easily end up resulting in a protest. So if you you would acquire the system, you would go to raise rates, and they say, no, you can't. And then you're stuck with in no man's land because some work needs to be done to the system, but they're not going to pay for it. So I think the benefit assessment district gets done at the same time as the acquisition, and then that's put on the tax rolls and collected that way. So that way you're secure in having the revenue to do the work. So that would be my recommendation as far as moving forward. Just one side comment on Nick's comment on the 75-25 share. I think you might want to look down the road because I would expect you'll get the ask of 25% on the construction side.
So if we look at the keys and we assume that the water system there, I'm speaking of most of the water lines, are in dire conditions. That's my assumption, and it's an opinion based on things I've heard from people that worked out there. And so without knowing any actual value of what it would cost to redo the water line there, it's probably going to be humongous. And I can't speculate on the cost, but let's just say it's $50 million to replace all the water lines in the Keys. 1,500 people, that's about 35 grand a piece. I mean, that's what
years. I mean, we did some numbers.
It was like.
I know, and I'm just throwing numbers out on the top of my head, but I'm just saying, we don't really know what condition it's in, do we?
It's not the best.
Anecdotally.
It was very, politically, very political.
Yeah, I mean, we have challenges on our system as well, so at some point, maybe you compare our average condition to their average condition and project some improvements over time. Again, we just want to make sure that the Keys pace their way down the road.
And with that, if your example was right, Chris, if it's $50 million, that's roughly a little over $1,000 a year per customer for 30 years.
Yeah.
Financing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Without increasing.
I guess it's not terrible, if you're financing it, but who's financing it? I mean, it would be hopefully not us.
well, we would be able to get much better terms financing most projects than the Keys. So
And then where does that put us in the CIP thing? If their system is in dire need of repair or replacement, does that
yeah, I mean, it's all
trump
got
everything else we're doing? I wouldn't think
It would
so.
not, it should not, and would not, I would say.
I mean, who has the staff up? I mean, I'm not trying to be isolationist or anything.
No, but to your point, I think, and to Gary's statement, no way. Like, you asked for 25% of construction, and I'll show you the door.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, give me a break. Like, the idea you will build and infill, and then have the people of South Lake Tahoe pay for it, it's disgusting, it won't happen. Like, even if I don't get elected to the board, I'll show up that day and just go, yes, I get here. That's ridiculous. So, no, I don't have a worry with that, to be honest. Because, like, if they were here right now, I would have said that exact same thing. But I do think it's a very kind of wise tale, because you can see, as they pull the thread from the sweater. But I still think it's worth investigating a little bit further and kind of showing some goodwill, because again, if we can structure this well, it could be to our benefit, although there's a lot between here and there, because the staffing there's going to be, to how many individuals you would hire, that would alter for everybody. So, there's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, I mean, we're here for the community and the good of the people that pay the rates. And if they become ratepayers, we're obligated to do the best we can for the ratepayers. And so I'm not trying to say we shouldn't look into that. We should be very cautious about how it's approached. And I most likely won't obviously be here when that happens.
Yeah.
No way.
Just in general, I think we've all pretty much stated this in different ways. It's just that we do not want to straddle our existing ratepayers with the cost of bringing the Tahoe Key system up to snuff. And, recognize that we ourselves would need to do quite a bit of up to like $26 million, depending on what option we select to bring water to the Keys. So,
We had a conversation with Ken Payne earlier this week from El Dorado Water Agency about this topic of, funding sources available to help offset some of these costs. And he reiterated what we had been hearing directly from the state earlier this year, that, there are pools of money available for some of these consolidation efforts. And so, I think that's going to be one of our next steps, is to see, is there money available from the state to help this effort along?
Yeah, there's a state program out there that needs to be looked into, I think right away. And we'll help the Keys look at the state options. I also talked to Ken Payne since our last meeting about their interest and ability in funding part of the Phase 3 work. And there is ability and interest there. So the Water Agency will be here for their board meeting next Wednesday, and going to be bringing in Mark Madison to talk about, add an item to that agenda to talk about this Phase 3 work, the discussions between our entities up to this point, and at least let the board know about this upcoming phase 3 work.
Baby steps. Let's get all the facts in front of us before I make a call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess the only thing else that I had is, in fairness to those in attendance from Keys, I mean, it was a really kind of honest, frank, positive discussion. So, I don't want to do anything else besides that. It was very productive.
Okay. Let's move on to board member reports. Anybody? Nothing, okay.
Well, actually, I would add one thing. I know the South Lake Tahoe City Council voted on Tuesday to ban small water bottles. And so in an effort to bring Tahoe tap and, Shelley's efforts and, many others that contributed to that, I would say congratulations. And those who hike in Tahoe are going to be thankful that you don't see all the small water bottles. So, kudos.
Was there at the water agency meeting?
There was not, they're over here, the next one.
Oh, it's over here, okay. Looks like Shelley's gonna talk to us.
Good afternoon. Let me get my PowerPoint pulled up real fast. There we go. I spent the morning corralling second and third graders out at Tahoe Paradise Park for our environmental education programs, Wonders of Water, but we are not going to be talking about the water cycle. Right now, we're talking about legislative updates. So, the legislative session officially closed on Friday. That's when the governor had to sign all the bills that Congress had sent his way. And I wanted to provide a few updates on what happened and how that might impact us at the district. So AB 2142, we have our turf buyback program where we pay people to take out turf. Traditionally, folks have received a check up to $2,000 from us, and then the IRS sends them a 1099 at the end of the year to tax them on that rebate. So this bill passed. It means that folks that receive rebates for turf removals won't be taxed on those rebate funds. A lot of that money comes from the state anyway through grants, so that's great for our customers. AB 2247, PFAS disclosures. So this was a bill that the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, CASA, it was really behind, it lobbied really hard for, requiring companies that have PFAS in their products to put it on a website. It did pass through Congress, but in the last hour, the governor vetoed it. So CASA's, we're bummed too, right? We want companies to disclose when they are putting chemicals in products that can get into our water and pollute it. There was some positive, a bill passed that both supported the sale of textiles and cosmetics to no longer be able to include PFAS starting in 2025. So some good news and bad news regarding the forever chemical. AB 2201, groundwater extraction. This would have substantially changed how applications for new or expanded groundwater wells were reviewed and approved. It would have required us to do a lot more work. It did not pass, so that is good for us. And then another thing I wanted to mention, I guess I'll just wait till I get there, is SB 1157. This was regarding indoor residential water use. So how many gallons per person per day is allowed? So it's not that each person we're tracking what they're doing, but for a water district, you take your population, you multiply it by how many gallons per person you can have, and you come up with a water budget for your indoor water use.
What was currently in statute was much higher. This bill really cranked it down, made those numbers very more conservation focused. It was a very contentious bill. Aqua was very much opposed to it because of the cost and the challenge it will be for water districts to implement it. It did pass. So starting from now through the end of 2024, it's 55 gallons per person per day. It ratchets down to 47 gallons per person per day from 2025 to 2029, and then in 2030 it goes down to 42. So the question is, how does this affect us? So on the screen you see two charts. The taller of the charts, it says all homes. This is if you use straight up our census tract number for how many people live in Tahoe, and you divided it by water use. You can see that we are below that 55 gallons per person per day. So we're around 47. However, the state has said that there is a variance that can be used for calculating this, and one of the variances is seasonal population. So the good news is the entire state's variance was based on our data, our water use numbers, our populations. And so that variance, we're hoping that it gets approved as presented. If it does, the column that shows permanent only, this removes, this recognizes that we have tons of tourists that come into town that use buku amounts of water, showering and all the rest. So it shows that for indoor water use for just our permanent residents, it brings it down to 30 gallons per person per day. So the moral of the story is, this bill passed, it was very contentious, lots of water districts were very anxious about it, but for us, as, even if a variance for seasonal population isn't included, we can meet this law through 2029, but with the variance, we should be good to go for indoor water use. And then the last bill I wanted to just provide a quick update to you on is SB 222. This is regarding low-income water rate assistance. The purpose is to provide financial assistance for drinking water and wastewater services for low-income residential customers. The state board would implement the program at the state level, and then community water districts would have a major role in applying the assistance to water bills for those that are enrolled. ACWA had, the Association of California Water Agencies, had opposed the bill, mainly because it was very unclear who does what, and working with the state can be challenging. It did pass, so we will see how that rolls out, and our hope is that we can promote it for our community members to take advantage of to help offset some of their bills. So overall, it was a pretty good legislative session. Any questions on that? Okay, so with elections just around the corner, I just wanted to bring up how these elections may impact our region. We were very much a part of redistricting. Who's running is very much because the districts have changed. So just a quick overview, for the U.S. House, in the past, McClintock has represented us, and we had a really strong relationship with us. He's been a big advocate for the district. The boundary lines for the district have changed, and he's rerunning, but rerunning for the southern part of the district. So he will no longer represent us. So the two candidates that are running for that seat, back up. So our region is is usually Republican. However, this is considered a hot race to watch because there's been so many Bay Area transplants into this region. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. We've got Kevin Kiley, who is an Ivy League lawyer and is endorsed by Trump, and Kermit Jones, who is a Placerville Navy surgeon turned medical doctor. Kermit Jones is hoping his more moderate political messaging will help give them a fighting chance. So we shall see. For California, on the Senate side, this is one of the most talked about races, and it's because there were newly drawn district lines with no incumbent running. Something unique to California is that when it's not the Republican with the most votes and the Democrat with the most votes pair off with each other. For this race, it was whoever got the two most votes in the primaries. This is a traditionally Republican area. So many Republicans ran that everybody is shocked it's two Democrats that got the most votes. So it doesn't matter which way you side politically. For our region, this is an exciting time because California is controlled by Democrats. This is the one time we will have a state senator who's a Democrat and in the majority party, and the whole state is going to be trying to support them because we think that they'll likely only be a one-term candidate. So we're expecting there to be member asks. We're expecting a lot of money to come into the region, and hopefully to use this time to get things done. A few weeks ago, I met both of these candidates. We toured them around the North Shore of Tahoe, really highlighted the need for additional funding for fire suppression infrastructure. So they both are aware of our issues, and we'll see what's between the two. And then finally, with the state assembly, again, the lines were redrawn. Megan Daly is the incumbent, has a lot of support, and is expected to win. So, who is in office representing us very much impacts what we can ask for, how much money that they can allocate to us. So we've been doing a lot of outreach in the last few months to try to develop Tahoe champions in the state assembly and state senate that care deeply about Tahoe and want to give us money. So John's mentioned some of the tours we've done. We were down in Sacramento in April lobbying. We toured Congressman Amadei around the Calvert Fire. In July, in August, we had a bunch of legislative staff up to show them the Calvert Fire, and then that meeting that I just mentioned with Tim Robertson and Marie Alfredo Gill was a few weeks ago. We're also, now's a really busy time for our partnerships. So we're a part of the California Tahoe Alliance. That group consists of us, the other California public utility districts, the city, the county, CTC, the league, TRTA. And essentially what it is, it's a group of Tahoe folks that all put money together to pay for state lobbyists to focus on Tahoe issues. And so right now is the time that we're revamping our goals and our strategies for this upcoming year. This is also a really busy time for the Tahoe Water for Fire Suppression Partnership. So this is the group that works under TRPA's Environmental Improvement Program. You'll recall that this is the first year that our group received funding through the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. $2.1 million was allocated just to water agencies in the basin to address fire flow concerns. So because we finally got those federal funds, our partners are very excited about trying to get more. Our plan is to go to Congress to ask for $15 million to be allocated this year. We shall see what happens, but now's the time when all of the water agency partners that are a part of this partnership are developing their project list. So everybody submits projects, we rank them internally so that we have they're prioritized based on need and ability to increase fire flow. And we'll take that list and we'll lobby like crazy and we'll try to get as much money into the basin to help fight fire. So with that, any questions on legislative or legislative affairs?
I just said one thing, and we talked about this in the past in regard to the California Tahoe Alliance and the priority setting exercise you're going to go through. we talked about the limiting factors that are imposed upon us by the CPUC. And I'd like to at least have that be brought up as an item to be lobbying for the state with that group.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and now's the time to bring it up.
Right.
So I'll bring that up with the group.
I think last we had talked about perhaps including that as well. So we'll
Kind of renewable energy versus sustainable energy package.
Yeah.
Right. And biomass is something that touches multiple partners in the group, and that we've discussed, where it falls on the list. At the meeting yesterday, or whatever day it was, affordable housing came up, and that's a big issue. It wasn't anyone in the group's number one issue. Other things like that, transportation, responsible recreation, water lines for fire suppression, Mr. John, are kind of the three biggies.
I guess what I would say is, water lines are irrelevant if you can't push water through them. You could have the best water line system on earth, it could be perfect. If you can't push the water, doesn't mean anything.
I'll bring this forward for the group for sure.
Yes, sustainable tourism is part of the group's
Right.
effort.
Kind of that responsible
Aquatic invasive
recreation.
species,
Oh, yeah,
environmental
thank you.
protection,
You want to say something?
forest health. So Shelley, thanks for your efforts. Shelley's doing a lot more of this. So I've been transitioning a lot of these legislative duties to Shelley. And we're also working on her job description to reflect those changes. And I also wanted to say, give Shelley props going back to that water conservation regulations. She's been working with, the State Water Board, with Stantec, with University of Davis, and the Eldorado Water Agency was also an important, connected a lot of dots for us in that effort. But Shelley's been in the trenches and making sure our data was used for that legislation and for the variance. So thank you for that.
I love that Shelley teaches both our kids and our elected officials about water.
Okay, John.
Okay, thanks. Got a couple updates. Of course, we'll start with staffing again. In customer service, we received 43 applications for customer service representative. We have 2 openings in customer service right now. Interviews coming October 13th. So 43 applications, that's a great turnout. And we're seeing a lot of local applicants. Many of them are employees of other agencies in town who are looking to make a positive move to the district. So we really want to be a top workplace in the region, especially with the labor and housing challenges locally. And I think this is a really good sign that we're achieving that. People see that we have a caring and collaborative culture, and they want to be challenged as part of a high-performance workforce. So I think good signs there. Moving on to plant operations, looking for a plant operator, another great turnout. We're reviewing 25 applications with interviews planned for October 25th. And then engineering, for asset management analyst. This is Ryan's old position. We have 5 interviews scheduled for October 14th, and 2 of these are internal candidates who participated in a cross-training program for the last couple of months. So great to see our in-house folks get a chance at these great positions. A lot of in-house interest also on the upcoming engineering inspection position. And then finally, we're in the process, just want to let the whole board, we talked about this in committee just before the meeting. We're also in the process of updating, and I would say improving job descriptions for our administrative assistant, assistant clerk of the board. This is Marla's old position. For electrical tech, we have a retirement coming up. And for the engineering inspectors, 1 opening coming up there. So that's all I have for staffing. We had a lot of staffing discussions today. Next item, I want to talk about a safety program we're starting up and about standard operating procedures, SOPs. So Liz and I have noticed that there's been an uptick in injuries at the district in recent years, mostly sprains and sprains, but sometimes more serious. And many or most of these can be prevented. So we started working with our insurance carrier, JPIA, to implement a best practices program called Commitment to Excellence. So there's no cost to the district, and this is part of their services for us, and we're expecting to work with our crews and kick that off over the next few months and into next year. And so I've also noticed there's really a surprising lack of standard operating procedures, SOPs, in many departments at the district. And in some cases, the lack of SOPs have really contributed to some injuries, some minor, some not so minor, and it could have been a lot worse. One example, I've got a couple examples of this. One example was a hot tap on a pressurized water line over here at the college that was being performed incorrectly. There was no standard operating procedure in place being used. The installation went wrong, and basically the whole apparatus blew back on one of our crew members, hurting his shoulder. Could have been a lot worse, but he's still dealing with that shoulder injury. So that could have been prevented, I think, with the proper SOP in place and being used. For another example, there was an incorrect installation and removal of a line stopper on that inverted siphon out of DVR. And this resulted in a mild concussion. Again, it could have been a lot worse. We need an SOP in place. So really, the more I look, the more SOPs I don't see. These aren't new processes or procedures. The proper SOPs have just never been put together and implemented in the field. So I think this is really a major oversight and a major risk for the district and our employees. So we have to do something about that. We're now working actively with our crews to develop, train, and implement SOPs across many district systems. That's all for today. Any questions, comments? Let me know.
It's good. I mean, I know when I was at the Forest Service, we'd have these tailgate sessions before we did just about everything, and it was just kind of walking through things to be, aware of and careful of. So I think it's good. Ultimately, hopefully, it doesn't want to hurt our staff.
I think we need more of those tailgates, and that's part of that program we're working on with JPIA. You start the day with a tailgate session. We're going to do a hot tap today. Here's the SOP.
Let's go through it.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we do have some closed session. So if we want to go out of open session into closed session, if any needs a break or open session, that needs a report. Meeting adjourned.